What are the different tools that you should have in your bag to keep yourself calm when you are triggered? Like some tips that you can tell our community on this.
So again, it really depends on, one is this happening frequently? So again, I would like to say that if something is a one-off situation and you completely lost your cool and you couldn't handle it, it doesn't necessarily qualify to be a trigger, because those are one-off situations. But if there is a pattern to it, if this is repeating on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, and you see yourself in that same situation, so it could be around, let's say, when you are toilet training the child, okay, or when you are looking at school admissions, or when you're talking about homeworks and distractions and peer issues. Again, across ages there are different kinds of problems, but based on what is happening, and if you see the frequency is increasing, I think there are few things that I tell people, and you can follow that, and I'm more than happy to share it here. One is that you write down what are those triggers, okay, and write them down very clearly, right? For example, and very honestly. So for example, for many parents I come across, messiness is a big trigger, right? When they see everything is strewn here and there, and even if they clean 5 times a day, then again there are some new toys on the floor, so that becomes a trigger. So you write it down as explicitly as possible that I cannot handle mess, like that is really something that I can't handle. Or spilt milk is a big trigger for me. Or my child getting late for the school bus, okay, and they are missing their bus, or the bus is waiting. Whatever it is, you have to become aware, and you have to be willing to write it down, put it in words on a piece of paper, right? It's important to write it down. Once you have written those down, you break them into 2 separate categories, okay? The first category is this an emergency? The second category is this a non-emergency? So just to give you an example, the non-emergency kind of triggers would be, just giving an example, for example, my child being a fussy eater, okay, them not eating on time. So if 2 p.m. is our lunch time, they don't eat, and they don't eat at 3 p.m. I understand that this is very disconcerting for parents, but if you really take a very high level view of it, it is not an emergency. It's not, the world is not going to fall apart if your child eats at 3 or 3:30 and not at 2, right? So you need to have that awareness to tell yourself, okay, it's a common situation. It is, and it is a logistical issue, because logistically you need to finish lunch at a particular time so that your house help, when they come to clean the utensils, everything gets done. So in your mind you're thinking right, in your position you are absolutely right. But now when you take a larger view, just take a step back and take a larger view, it is not really an emergency. So on the other hand, let's say my child, for me, missing their bus is an emergency, because let's say I don't have the wherewithal to go and drop them and all of that. So that's an emergency for me. So this second step, the first step was to write your list of triggers. The second step is to actually make this demarcation between emergency and non-emergency. Okay. So once you've done these 2 things honestly, authentically, the third thing that you do is, let's take about the non-emergencies. Or let's take the emergencies first. So when we talk about emergency, the thing that you need to do about emergency is that you need to have some backup plan. You need to include more people in your fold, and you need to tell them, whoever those trusted few people are, it could be your spouse, it could be your in-laws, your own parents, your sibling, whoever is your trusted person, tell them that this is an emergency for me. Okay, this is my inner need that this doesn't happen. Okay, this is an emergency. Getting hit, falling, hitting your head, all of this is an emergency. So first communicate it to a trusted person, and then tell them what is the backup plan. If something like this happens, what should we do? Let's say if the bus is getting missed, what should we do? I don't have the wherewithal to go and drop, then is there somebody else who takes up that responsibility? So for emergencies, you need to make a whole plan. But now let's come to the non-emergencies. Things like child being a fussy eater, things like them watching 2 hours of screen time instead of the 1 hour. I know it is, screen time is it's a big Pandora's box, and I don't want to go there. But let's say it is a whole topic in itself. But let's say in the context of the conversation we are having right now, it is not an emergency right now. So for all the non-emergencies, you need to tell yourself this mantra, which I have learned, and this is by a very, very renowned parenting counselor. Her name is Dr. Laura Markham. I follow her work for the longest time. I think 2014, 15, right about when my son was born in 14. That's when I came across her work. I follow her books, and I follow her courses. And this one mantra has really stuck with me, which is, this is not an emergency. Okay, whenever that happens, whenever that thing that is triggering you is happening, but you know it is in your non-emergency list, you repeat this in your head saying, this is not an emergency. And then you do sort of like a back counting from 10 to 1, not a forward counting, always back counting, because that back counting, because of the discomfort of the back counting, it gets you to focus on your breath and on the count instead of what is happening. So there's a whole science around it. And you do that back counting, you tell yourself this is not an emergency. And one thing that Dr. Laura Markham says is stop, drop, breathe. Stop what you're doing, drop your agenda and breathe. So whatever sticks with you. See, these are all, I would say, tips and tricks, but not everything works for everyone. So for me, it might work to remember stop, drop, breathe. For somebody else, it might work to remember this is not an emergency. For somebody else, the back counting could work. So these are just some tools. Like I said, exactly. So it depends on what your personality is and what you remember out of this conversation that we are having right now. But they are all very effective things if you follow it very logically. See, whenever we become extremely emotional about a relationship, and obviously we are so emotionally invested in our family, in our parents, in our children, in our spouse, that we can't think logically, right? It doesn't come to us in that heated moment, in that moment where the trigger is happening. But if you are aware of this, and if you prepare these things beforehand, this is my list of triggers, this is my list of emergencies, my list of non-emergencies, you are more likely to remember this in that moment when the world is falling apart.
Very rightly said. And I think we come across these in every day, which makes it, you more consciously you have to follow it or to practice it.